Welcome to NewsNation's Backscroll, where we look back at our major news coverage on the most important topics and personalities of our time.
Days away from the opening statements in the Idaho quadruple murder trial. And if you thought things couldn't look any worse for Bryan Kohberger with, the DNA and the cell phone data and the surveillance video and an eyewitness description of his eyebrows, at least, not to mention the laughable alibi, I like stargazing at 4 o'clock in the morning with my phone turned off. I know, I kind of thought that too, until what I heard today. A smoking gun that both sides somehow managed to keep under wraps for months. There is apparently another eyewitness. It's the DoorDash driver who delivered food to Xana Kernodle less than 10 minutes before Xana and her boyfriend Ethan Chapin and Xana's housemates Maddie Mogan and Kaylee Gonzalez were all savagely murdered by an intruder. Police have confirmed to us that a woman seen in some of the interrogation footage from an unrelated incident is a 43-year-old woman known only as MM in the court documents. She was arrested that day for a DUI while being questioned at the Pullman, Washington police station. Just happened to reveal to the officers that she had to, quote, testify in a big murder case here because I'm the DoorDash driver, end quote. When the officer asks which murder case, the woman says, quote, the murder case with the college girls. I'm the DoorDash driver. I saw Bryan there. I parked right next to him, end quote. And I think I need to read that last part again because I did a double take when I first saw it. I saw Bryan there, she says. I parked right next to him. That interrogation video was posted on a YouTube account where it was discovered by web sleuths and journalists. It's unclear, though, whether the woman's outing will affect the start date of the trial itself. The defense has been pushing for a delay for weeks now, but that's over the media leaks, the whole Dateline episode kerfuffle. And that is due to be the subject of a big hearing tomorrow. But the prosecutors want the trial to stay on target for the planned August 11th beginning. Our senior national correspondent, Brian Enton, is in Boise, Idaho tonight with much more on what all of this means. First of all, I did not see this coming, a second eyewitness.
Yeah, this is a bombshell, Ashley. If it is true what this DoorDash driver is saying, then this is a bombshell. I came to Boise thinking that the hearing tomorrow was going to be the big story, but this is big. The Idaho Statesman was the first to break it today. Basically, this DoorDash driver, who we knew existed, by the way. We've known for a long time there was a DoorDash driver, that she goes by MM. She's been referenced in the court documents. We knew that she arrived there to deliver DoorDash at 4 a.m., about 10 minutes or so before the murders. But what we didn't know is what is in this body camera video. And let me explain this a little bit. You did, Ashley, but the reason we know about this is because last year, this DoorDash driver, totally unrelated to the Bryan Kohberger case, she got pulled over, suspected of driving under the influence. She had a expired tag, suspected of being under prescription pills, and she got pulled over, and she just started volunteering this information to the police while she was being interviewed, and it's on body cam. And she said that she's the DoorDash driver from the Bryan Kohberger case, that she saw Bryan Kohberger, which is really the headline here, that she's a witness who saw Bryan Kohberger, and all of this just happened to come out through this new body camera video from Pullman, Washington.
So, Brian, take us back to the house. But we're going to have to describe it because the house has been torn down. But if you look at the front of the house, there's a parking lot out front where all the cars were lined up, and they stayed that way till they were all towed. But this DoorDash driver said, I parked next to him, which makes me wonder if she's talking about the parking lot out front or if she's talking about that side street off to the left where that bushy tree is, that big, tall, bushy tree is just adjacent to the red car there. Because there's a side street that goes up that left-hand side of the house, and isn't it
yeah, it's a very
believed that the killer used? Yeah. Walk me through that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. There was someone talking in my ear. Yeah, it's a very, very important part of what she said. Not only that she said, I saw Bryan Kohberger, but I wrote this down. She said, I parked right next to him. Now, you think about DoorDash. We all order DoorDash. A DoorDash driver typically would park right in front of the house where they're delivering the food. They'd pull into the driveway. You see them in the driveway. They get out. They go to the front door. They give the customer the food. Why would the DoorDash driver drive onto the side street of the house, which with the murder house, you've got the front of the house, you've got the driveway like you described it, but then you've got this side road that goes up the side near an apartment building. You can't even walk down to the house like through, you'd have to go through the woods unless you walked all the way around if you went to the side road. We don't know exactly where Bryan Kohberger parked, you know, if he's guilty of all this. They've never said that in any of the documents. We know that he's caught on camera going up there and going up towards the house, but we don't know exactly where he parked. But if she's saying that she parked right next to him, does that mean that he parked right in front of the house, that he just pulled right in the driveway and then went in for about 10 minutes to commit these murders? We don't know, but it's certainly interesting to think about.
That's what I wondered. And then also, just with the pictures we're looking at now, again, I'm always so sad when I see those cars parked out front behind the yellow police tape, because it's sort of the vehicle's frozen in time from the kids who would never come back to use their own vehicles until their parents or their loved ones took those vehicles away. But it certainly doesn't look like there's a whole lot of room, which made me wonder if this DoorDash driver parked out front on the street, knowing, well, I can't go into this little parking lot. I'm just going to have to park out here on the street, which now would make a little more sense. If Bryan Kohberger did this, if he's really the killer, he might be surveilling from a little farther away, not so obvious, and out on the street. But that's the only thing I can think of, because as you said, going up that side road, it's really hard to get access to the house. As a DoorDash driver, you just wouldn't go up that side road to the side of the house.
Yeah, the whole thing up there is tight and confusing. The layout when you drive up there is very, very strange and tight. We would always have a hard time finding a place to park up there. There's a little bit of parking on the street there, but it's difficult. It's hard to get in there. So there's a place where maybe a DoorDash driver could have just pulled off without going fully into the driveway and like put their flashers on and run up with the food. But it's hard to imagine that Bryan Kohberger just parked right in front of the house. I have to say I'm a little skeptical of this whole story. Just the way that it came out through the body camera video, the fact that in all of the police documents that we've been able to see in the probable cause, we knew there was a DoorDash driver, Ashley, but if they had a real credible witness who saw Bryan Kohberger at the house, that is huge. How would we not know that by now? It's possible it's just like a bombshell that they're saving for the trial, but don't you think maybe that would have been in the probable cause, or in all these court hearings that we've been to where we get new little nuggets? I would have thought maybe we would have heard about that by now.
I can't believe that it wasn't even a whisper rumor. You're right, especially with all the reporters that descended upon the story, finding every DoorDash driver in town. I know that we try to reach every DoorDash driver in town, but the problem is everybody, does side hustles with DoorDash. So it could have been anybody. And that was the problem with actually trying to find the person who did deliver the food that night. Okay, the question about this person in particular, MM, the woman in particular who's, told the police, I'm the one who's going to have to testify in this case. I'm the DoorDash driver. I can't imagine what it's like to be her, because she had nothing to do with any of this. I'm sure she wants nothing to do with any of this. Like, the stress and the frustration that this would have brought to her life, I'm sure, is unthinkable. But she also may have the credibility issues, especially if there's a DUI in play, or, drinking, and she seemed to say on the body cam, it isn't the first time.
Yeah, and look, I feel terrible for her too, Ash. I mean, the fact that we've confirmed she is the DoorDash driver, and she was there at 4 a.m. just minutes before this brutal slaughter happened. That's a hard thing to deal with, I'm sure, and I feel very, very sorry for this woman. But in terms of credibility, I've seen the body camera video. She's pulled over, she's crying, she's had DUI in the past. They take her back to the station. She's emotional, she's distraught. And she says, I'm the witness, and she's just telling this cop that I'm the witness from the Bryan Kohberger case. I'm the DoorDash driver. I saw Bryan. I parked right next to him. I'm just wondering, was she was really the DoorDash driver, but like maybe she thinks that she parked right next to him, but it wasn't actually him. I don't know. I just think about the credibility. And I go back to the point that how is this the first time we're hearing this story? And it's through this means, through a body camera video that's totally unrelated of this woman in a very, very desperate situation after she gets pulled over for DUI.
So what do you think just in terms of this hearing tomorrow? Look, like you said, your focus was all about the Dateline leaks and how the defense is just sort of apoplectic about how this information got out from under the gag. Now there's this, and it's out there. It's not a leak. It's just, people put things together. Is this going to have an effect potentially on tomorrow's hearing and the issue at hand, which is a delay in the upcoming August start?
I don't think so. I suspect this will not come up at the hearing. I do think it's going to be a bombshell hearing. I think it's going to be a really interesting, juicy hearing. I think that the judge is going to have to hear both sides about whether they want to delay, and I think he'll probably make a decision because they've already filed their briefs with their reasoning. But what I'm more interested in is at the last hearing, Ashley, you remember, he talked about wanting to bring on a special prosecutor to do an investigation to sniff out who the leaker is within law enforcement and figure out who leaked that information to Dateline. I think we're going to get an update on that. Are they going to bring in a special prosecutor now to have, could there be criminal charges? Have they figured out who this person is? They may have even figured it out by now. I'm very interested in all of that, which is gonna come out at this hearing tomorrow, Ashley.
Have you been, and listen, everything in this case has been difficult to learn, but have you heard any rumblings of an investigation already? Like, have they been ferreting out who's spoken with whom? Have they confiscated cell phones and that sort of I hate to even suggest it, but asking people within the investigative circle, hand over your phones or we'll subpoena them and we'll search your history?
Well, we know that they asked everyone involved in the case and everyone in law enforcement involved in the case to save all of the records in their cell phones and emails so that they could go back and try to figure out who this leaker is. In terms of how the investigation has progressed, we don't know. That doesn't surprise me, though. This judge is serious, and he was serious before, and people were nervous to speak out before. I'll tell you, after the last hearing, I don't think we're going to know anything about that investigation. I think people are nervous, which is why I think it's going to be interesting tomorrow to finally find out what's been going on behind the scenes here, and will they in fact delay the trial because of this ongoing investigation into the leaker.
Wow. And then this weirdness that just sort of crops up the day before the hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, obviously, don't make plans at this time tomorrow night, Bryan Engine. You're the lead guest once we hear how the hearing goes. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for scrambling early to get that information up for us. I appreciate it. Better or for worse, crime shows have forever changed the way juries approach their jobs. I'm not talking about true crime shows like this one. I'm talking about those dramas. What we used to call police procedurals. Law and Order and all that, Forensic Files and CSIS, I think you call it. I don't watch them, funny enough. I like the true stuff. But they all toss around lingo and they show off the latest great tech. They generally solve cases in an hour or less, right down to the micromolecular level. They do this for crime, what doctors do for illness, but with one big difference. Patients do not decide whether a tumor is benign or not, or whether the rash is contagious. Jurors, on the other hand, they do. They've got the power. They are plucked from the public with no legal education. They very much decide whether someone's guilty and sometimes whether someone will be executed for it. And when it comes to evidence and proof and reasonable doubt, 21st century jurors have come to expect some pretty big things, high expectations. They hate loose ends and unconnected dots and statistical probabilities. And to those modern-day arbiters of guilt or innocence, I say this hour is for you. Tonight, we are all about that one show-stopping piece of evidence that catches the defendant dead to rights. It's best known as the smoking gun. Could be a gun, but more often it's a photo or some video, text messages or emails, cell phone data, or Google searches or DNA. The Bryan Kohberger trial coming up fast in Idaho has all of these things, minus an actual gun. But its smoking gun may very well be the DNA. The state says Kohberger's DNA is on the snap of the knife sheath, which was found next to Maddie Mogen's body. The defense has tried every which way to undermine the process that led to that conclusion, and failing that, to keep the findings as far away from the courtroom as possible. But for now, at least it is the heart of the prosecution's case. And for obvious reasons, right? You know who knows this better than anyone else I know? My NewsNation colleague, Bryan Enton. Bryan, I know that literally up until this moment you have been going through these court docs, and I think you're still going through them. So there may be more shoes to drop. But let's start with what we know, and let's just start with that K-bar knife because, you know, I felt like the biggest moment in this case was that they found the knife sheath, and then the second biggest moment was that they figured out DNA on the snap, that little spot here on the knife sheath, the thing that snaps it shut. That's where that little tiny speck of DNA was, and that it matched Bryan Kohberger. But now we have him in court documents from Amazon buying a K-bar knife, a sheath, and a sharpener.
Yeah, more than 100 pages of court documents came out just within the last couple of hours, and this was buried in the documents. And you mentioned it. I mean, this is a massive deal. This is a huge, huge piece of evidence, something very, very helpful to the prosecution. They are saying that between March 20th and March 30th of 2022, so that would be about 8 months before the murders happened, that Bryan Kohberger, through his Amazon account, bought the K-bar knife, bought the sheath, and also bought a sharpener.
So what I thought was also interesting, and I may be, you know, superimposing my thoughts over their documents here, but it felt to me that the prosecution was making its case by saying we did not cherry pick. We didn't cherry pick anything. What we did was we found a purchase of what was a murder weapon, similar to a murder weapon and a sheath. And also, we looked at other activity, and never did he seem to be a hunter. Never did he seem to be a fisherman buying this stuff all the time. It seemed to be just this one time that he bought this kind of weapon.
Yeah, they looked at all of the activity, all of the Amazon activity for several different time periods leading up to the murders. And what's interesting is the way we found this out is there's these filings going back and forth between the defense and the prosecution, because the defense is trying to get a lot of this Amazon information and Amazon activity thrown out. Obviously, I mean, now we know why. It's damning to Bryan Kohberger. So they've been saying, hey, the state is cherry picking, some of this stuff shouldn't be included. And in those filings back and forth, that's where this massive tidbit was, right, buried in the documents, that Bryan Kohberger had bought the knife sheath on Amazon.
Sure will be interested to find out what his answers are to where is that knife that you proudly bought. It wasn't in any of, well, we don't know, but I didn't see it on a manifest of any of the search warrants at his apartment or in Pennsylvania. I didn't see a K-bar knife, a knife sharpener, or a knife sheath in anything that they were able to seize from all the places that they searched of his. So it would be interesting if this had nothing to do with anything, then where's your precious K-bar knife that you spent all that money on, you know, on Amazon back in March? And he, you know, better have a pretty good answer for that. Let me jump to that selfie. It just sent chills down my spine to see him showered up and giving the thumbs up and being super proud, looking freshly washed right in front of the shower. And this was exactly at, was it 10:39, that photograph that was taken?
10:31 a.m.
10:31.
November 13th. So the day of the murders. The murders happened sometime around 4 a.m. This is 10:31 a.m. I was looking at it really closely. It looks like maybe he's in the bathroom, like in front of a shower, if you look closely. And this, again, was just sort of buried in these new court documents. We haven't really seen photos of him like this before, but they recovered this photo from his phone. And the reason that the prosecution is so interested in this photo is because of roommate Dylan's account that he had, that whoever came into their home had bushy eyebrows. That was one of the main things that she said. So this is apparently the photo closest to that time period of when the murders happened. And the prosecution wants to use this photo at trial to show the jury so they can look at this picture for themselves and decide whether or not, he's got bushy eyebrows.
In November of 2022, when Kaylee Gonzalez, Maddie Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin were murdered, Bryan Kohberger lived just across the border in Washington state, about 20 minutes away. His home state, where he returned after the killings and where he was arrested a few weeks later, is Pennsylvania. Both his student apartment and family home were searched. And of course, among the potential evidence that police took away from that family home were criminology books, an ID card inside a glove box that was inside a glove that was inside a box, a silver flashlight, multiple items of black clothing, a pair of black and white sneakers, and the rubber gloves that Kohberger was wearing while sorting his family's garbage in the middle of the night, I may add. In Washington, when police raided his student apartment, investigators seized, among other things, stained bedding, strands of what appeared to be hair, and a single glove. And none of that screams smoking gun. But smoking guns aren't always obvious, at least not to the non-experts. Fortunately, Brian Enton ran all of this past two of the smartest experts I know. Robin Dreeke is a retired FBI special agent and the former head of the Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program. And Katie Cherkasky is a criminal defense attorney and former federal prosecutor. And here's what they had to say.
Robin, I want to start with you. You heard me list out all of those items, everything we know, and it's come in bits and pieces, so it's interesting to lay it all out like that. Obviously, a lot we still don't know, but based on that, what do you make of Kohberger's criminal profile at this point?
He always strikes me from the very first time he was arrested that here's an individual that has studied this from books, and he has taken all his knowledge from research and no practical experience. And so it looks like he put together this project of his, and he gave himself an assignment for murder. And so that's what all this evidence looks like, is that he accumulated all these things, and the things he executed in the murder, like they can't find the murder weapon or the clothes he was actually wearing, he disposed of those because that's what the book said to do. Everything else that he accumulated, he held on to, maybe to be disposed of later or to be used in the future. But it strikes me as someone really conducting an experiment of an assignment he gave himself.
Yeah, interesting. And he had that survey at one point, which was like an experiment in its own way. Robin, what do you make of, and I'm sort of fascinated by this, the book that they took and some significance to page 118. What do you think that could mean?
That can be absolutely anything, because, and you said it earlier on, when they have the search warrant, they can't seize everything. They got to have a reasonable connection from the seizing agent's perspective of something that could be tied to the crime. And so if you have a book that is used in his field of study, it could be used and highlighted for something he was researching for school. It could also be something he's actually referencing for something he's trying to conduct in his life. It makes it challenging for a search team because it could have a lot of overlap, which is a little unusual. But it could be either or.
And it's something, like you said, it has to be relevant. At least they have to think it's relevant to the murder investigation. So that's why I'm so fascinated by that. I wonder what it is. Katie, what do you make of all of this? What are you honing in on when we list out all of the evidence? And as a defense attorney, I mean, it just seems like this guy is getting harder and harder to defend with all of this stuff that continues to come out.
Well, that's absolutely the case. And I think if I was his defense attorney, I would tell him, and again, I believe in the presumption of innocence here, but if he has any hope of avoiding the death penalty, I think that he needs to take a plea deal and express remorse as soon as possible. Any defense attorney is going to look at evidence that's seized and determine if there was any sort of issue with the search warrant, because it does have to be proper under the law. There were some pretextual stops here, the traffic stops that are a bit questionable in terms of whether they had proper basis to stop him and collect evidence of DNA that they then used to supplement their affidavits to get these other items. So any defense attorney is going to try to see if there's any way to keep some of this evidence out. If they can't, then the next thing you have to do is try to present any other reasonable explanation for why you might have things that seem suspicious, like gloves, black clothing, etc., but maybe have an innocent explanation of some sort. But in this case, with the circumstantial evidence mounting against him and all the physical evidence at that, I don't know that there's much fight to be had for the underlying crime.
It's interesting, Katie, you bring up plea deal to avoid the death penalty. But with all of this evidence and one family at least already saying that they want the death penalty, and it seems, at least from what we know, that the prosecution has somewhat of a pretty solid case, why would they even be considering a plea deal? I mean, do you think they would even consider it, Katie?
Well, in terms of a plea deal, I'm not necessarily saying that they would agree to that. It's more a matter of Kohberger trying to mitigate his ultimate sentence, because if he pleads guilty, whether he has a deal or not, there still has to be a determination as to whether he gets the death penalty. And if he expresses remorse and there's more of an explanation up front, then that's going to probably be his best shot to avoid the death penalty if that's his goal in all of this. That's not necessarily a deal. It's just a decision to plead guilty, what they call a naked plea, essentially, without any protection, but to do so to get some sort of potential benefit, some sort of leniency in terms of sentencing.